Hello， 大家好，我是 Teacher Lydia， 欢迎来到国际聊天室。Hey everyone, it's Teacher Lydia. You're listening to International Talk. 今天是我们国际聊天室第一集访谈，很荣幸请到我一个很重要的好朋友来跟我们分享他的故事。我去年认识 Aria 的时候，就觉得他是一个非常有趣的人。爸爸是日本人，妈妈是美国人，大概8年前搬来台湾教英文和学中文。首先我会问他一些简单的问题，让大家先认识他的背景跟生活。放轻松听，这段结束后我会用中文简单描述他的回答。Let's welcome Aria. Thank you, Aria, for coming today. So let's start with the most basic question. Okay. Probably everyone asks you all the time. Where are you from?
I'm from Hokkaido, Japan.
And your parents are from?
My dad is from Hokkaido and my mom's from Pennsylvania, like the east coast of the US.
Cool. Where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Sapporo my entire life until 18.
Where did you go after that?
So after high school, I went to Pennsylvania for college because I wanted to get to know my mom's side of the family better and like where she grew up.
And can you tell us how many languages do you speak? I know you speak many, many languages.
So I have studied Spanish and Arabic, but I technically speak 2.5. And I only say 2.5 because my Chinese isn't that great, but I am a native speaker in English and Japanese.
So our listeners can't tell right now, but actually I think Aria's Chinese is really, really good. So why don't you tell us about what brought you to Taiwan? How long you've been in Taiwan?
So I've been in Taiwan for about 7.5 years at this point. It's been a while. But right after college, I had gotten a scholarship from the US government. And it was a scholarship to teach, which kind of sounds weird, but it's a pretty famous grant. And that's why I came to Taiwan.
How long were you teaching for?
Well, first it was only for a year. I was in Ilan teaching at a public school. And then as soon as the opportunity to apply for second year came up, I jumped on it because I knew that 1 year in Taiwan wasn't going to be enough.
And what are you doing at the moment? Because you're not teaching anymore.
No, I'm not teaching anymore, but I'm a full-time graduate student currently.
Where and what do you study? Tell us.
I'm at NTU and I study political science.
Very cool. Thanks. And it's very impressive because I think your classes aren't in Chinese, right?
Yes, the program is taught in Chinese, but there are courses that are taught in English so that the Taiwanese students can get used to using more English in an academic setting.
That's still really impressive though, because you don't actually have a Chinese background.
No, I don't.
But you just learned it from being here, which I think is really, really amazing. Maybe you can tell us, speaking of that, how did you learn Chinese?
Well, actually, I was kind of like a late bloomer when it came to Chinese because only in my last year in college did I realize I wanted to study Chinese. So senior year fall semester, I audited for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but I got really busy, so I kind of discontinued that. But then I opted to live in a flat with 3 other Chinese students so that I could be around Chinese language. Didn't learn too much. So when I came to Taiwan 7.5 years ago in the summer of 2013, like all I could do was really rely on my Japanese language skills with reading. So I didn't have a problem reading any signs or the menus, but I just had no idea how to say them in Chinese. So what I did was I would carry like a little notebook and a pen with me everywhere I went. And I would, if I didn't know how to say something, I would write it down in Japanese and hope that it would translate somehow to Chinese. And if it was different, then I would ask whoever I was talking to teach me the correct word or the correct phrases that I needed to use.
So you really were using your environment to try and really engage with the language and constantly learning and keep track of all the things you're learning.
Yes, everywhere I went, whether it was like a drink shop staff or a lady who sold clothes or anybody on the street that helped me out, I saw them as my teacher.
That's really cool. I think it's a really good way to learn language, to think of everyone as your teacher.
Yeah.
Not only your official teacher, but your classmates, your friends. Like you said, the shop owner, like restaurant waitress, like anyone who you talk to can be a teacher.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I like that. So last question for the more general part.
Okay.
What are your hobbies? I know you have lots of really interesting hobbies.
I used to do more art, like photography and drawing, but in the last couple of years, I've been more into belly dancing. I've actually been dancing for about 10 years at this point. Only as a student, I'm not good enough to actually teach it yet, but maybe someday I will. Who knows?
You cannot see her belly dancing, but I have, and I can say it's very, very, very cool. It looks really, really beautiful too. So I think it's a really hard dance style as well because it's very specific, right? The movements and
very specific. Oriental dancing, or what's known as belly dancing, there's a lot of hip movements, and you're supposed to make it look like it's easy, but you're using a lot of your muscles to isolate movements, whether it's your chest, your hips, or your feet, or arms. It gets pretty complex.
不知道大家听完 Aria 的回答有没有跟我一样觉得她真的是一个很有趣的一个人。那她一开始就说她来自 Hokkaido， 就是北海道，她爸爸就是北海道人，妈妈来自 Pennsylvania， 在 East Coast 就是东部，美国的东部。那她从小就是待在日本，直到她18岁之后，她毕业后她就决定去美国读大学，因为她想要更了解妈妈那边的故乡跟认识她的家人。那他很厉害哦，他有学过西班牙文还有阿拉伯文，但是他自己认为他只会讲2个半语言，就是英文、日文，然后一半的中文。那其实虽然很可惜没有听到 Aria 讲中文，但他的中文其实非常厉害。他来台湾7年半了，他说 at this point 就是目前为止来了7年半。他大学毕业后拿到一个奖学金，是可以在台湾教英文的奖学金，听起来有点奇怪，但它是一个蛮有名的一个奖学金。教完1年之后，他就决定想要继续留在台湾，他觉得台湾真的很棒，所以当他有机会申请第2年的奖学金，他说 I jumped on it， 因为他知道1年在台湾绝对不够。但是他现在其实没有在教英文了，他现在是一个 graduate student，也就是研究所的学生，他现在就读台大，而且他读的科系很厉害，是政治学哦。我那时候就说，我觉得他是个非常厉害的一个人 ，She's very impressive， 因为他的课程都是用中文。他就说，的确很多课是用中文，但是也有一些科目会用英文，因为他们希望可以让学生们习惯用英文读书。我一样继续夸赞他说，因为他没有一个中文的背景，他只是在来台湾之后才学了中文。我就问他说，可不可以跟大家分享你是怎么学中文的？他说 I was kind of a late starter, late bloomer， 意思就是他可能比其他人晚开始学中文。他是到了大学最后1年才发现，他对学中文有兴趣。他有稍微接触中文，但没有持续很久，还试着跟3个中国学生一起住，但他发现好像也没有学到很多，所以他刚来台湾的时候，他只能先靠他的日文的能力去阅读中文的国字。他其实发现，他可以理解很多，他看上面的 menu 啊之类的，他都看得懂，只是他不会讲，所以他那时候就带着一个笔记本跟一支笔，那他不管到哪里，他就会把他想说的话用日文写下来，然后看看能不能翻译成中文。如果他发现好像怪怪的，他就会问他身边的人怎么样可以比较标准的去说他想说的东西。那我觉得这是一个非常棒的一个学习方式，因为他就说他把每一个身边的人都当作是一位老师，无论是饮料店的人，还是一个服务生，或是同学室友们，他都把他当成是老师。最后我就问他说，他有哪些休闲娱乐呢？他就说他以前很喜欢拍照画画，但其实他现在比较常做的是跳舞。那他这个跳舞比较特别，他是在学肚皮舞，很厉害的一个舞蹈。他说他已经学了10年，但是都是学生，他说他还不够好可以去教。虽然听众们没有办法看到他的跳舞，但是我有看过，真的是一个很厉害而且很美的一个舞蹈。我就问他说是不是很困难的一个舞蹈风格，他就说看起来是一个很简单的一个舞蹈，好像只要动动腰就可以了，但其实没有那么简单。他说 You're using a lot of your muscles to isolate movements， 意思就是你要刻意去用不同的肌肉， 去固定不同的部位。当你在动一个地方的时候，其他部位还是要定住，所以其实是一个很吃力的一个舞蹈，而且有一点复杂。他说 It gets pretty complex， 就是有时候会变得蛮复杂的一个舞蹈。那在这里不知道大家听完有没有觉得好像有听懂一些，如果没有的话，当然欢迎回去再听一次，现在听完解答之后再听一次，搞不好会听懂更多的句子跟单字。那如果你觉得这段听起来很简单没问题，当然就可以听下半场的访谈。Aria 会跟我们分享更多他的一些故事，跟一些他觉得文化差异上的事情，还有他教学的经验。Alright, so now that our listeners know a little bit more about you, I want to talk to you a bit more about your experiences and your stories. The first thing I want to talk about is culture experiences. So you've been in Taiwan 7.5 years, you said?
Yes.
When you first arrived in Taiwan, so 7.5 years ago, were there any things that you felt like really shocked you? Any culture shock moments that you thought, wow, this country is so different, or this culture is so different?
I think the most shocking thing was how toilet paper wasn't being flushed and seeing a basket full of used toilet paper right in front of my eyes.
That's not something they do in Japan?
No. And I think because of that, when Japan started having more like Chinese tourists, Chinese and Taiwanese tourists, that's what they did because that's what they do back home. But Japanese people really weren't used to that. So I started seeing a lot of like posters and notes in bathrooms in my hometown in Sapporo in, like incorrect Chinese saying like, please don't put it in the waste bin. Please flush it down,
Here it's the opposite, right? They always have the sign saying, please don't flush the toilet paper.
Yeah. But like I've gotten used to it.
That's good. That's good. That's a good one. It's a small detail, but it's surprisingly important. So, or is there anything that happened, or did you hear anything about Taiwanese culture that you couldn't believe, or that you didn't understand, or you thought that's really strange?
I didn't find it strange, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but when I was applying for this scholarship back in college, I really didn't know what Taiwan was about. I didn't know what language people spoke here. I didn't know the culture, the history, or anything. But I did have a Taiwanese friend in college. Like, he was the only one Taiwanese student in my school. And he was like, yeah, people are nice there. And I was like, okay, sounds good. But I didn't know what he meant by that until I like really got here and interacted with local people. At least in my experience as a foreign young woman, people have been very nice and willing to help me. Like, I don't even have to say anything. Like, just looking a little confused on the streets, people come up to me in English and say, do you need help? Are you lost? And like, these people probably have places to go to, but they have always like offered to walk me to where I need to go to, or like if they don't know themselves, they'll like ask another Taiwanese person and like take their time to help me out. And so that's always been something I've been always thankful for, and just kind of shocked in a good way, because I don't think that really happens in Japan, where I'm from.
It is true that a lot of people who come to Taiwan say one of the things they like most about Taiwan is how friendly people are. Mm-hmm. So I think it is definitely an important factor for Taiwanese people.
Yeah, and I try to pass it on to other like non-Taiwanese people who visit Taiwan, because I want them to leave here and think, oh yeah, people were nice. Yeah.
Cool. Do you ever get asked about Japanese culture based on true or false stereotypes? Because you probably noticed a lot of people here do really like Japan, or they follow Japanese culture. Is there anything has anyone ever asked you, like, do you do that, or is it true that that's either true or false?
I don't think I get those kinds of questions from Taiwanese people per se. It seems like non-Taiwanese people that I meet in Taiwan seem to not know much about Japan. That's one thing I think that people misunderstand, maybe, that we don't eat like raw fish every day. It's really only for like birthdays or like graduations, special occasions, and celebrations.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you can like go out for sushi with your family once in a while, or like the kaiten sushi, the circular sushi, I don't know, conveyor belt sushi.
Yeah.
On the weekends, but it's not something we always eat.
That's
it's a special occasion thing.
I thought it was like a common general food, but
no. So when I see like sushi, quote unquote, in like packs sold on the streets, I'm like, this is so weird.
So the 7-Eleven sushi is probably weird.
That actually kind of scares me. I mean, I'm sure it's safe to eat, but yeah, it's not like, I don't know, the occasion isn't right, so like I don't just eat it every day. You know?
I guess it would be like if somebody ate steak every day, or was like, you know,
or
eating
like
fancy
turkey every day, maybe like that, because you know you only eat that for special occasions in the U.S.
Yeah, and to have it sold in the convenience store would be a little weird. I can get that. Is there a Taiwanese habit that you've developed since you've lived here?
So I always carry my water bottle with me and an umbrella. The umbrella especially because my first year in Taiwan, I lived in Ilan. So it basically rained all the time, like no matter what the season was. So you always had to be prepared. So always carry an umbrella and water because I was taught not to drink the tap water here. And there's always, you know, like water machines everywhere you go. So I carry that. I do this even when I'm in the US or Japan. And I think the biggest thing I do now is I keep my like food trash in the freezer.
That's not something you did before?
No. I mean, okay, so the first couple weeks or the first month in Ilan, I kept like fruit peels in the kitchen, in the sink, in a bag. And then I was starting to see these little bugs crawl in and out, and I didn't know what they were. They turned out to be little baby cockroaches.
There are no cockroaches in Japan? Or in the US?
Not where I'm from in like northern Japan. Like there's like a pride among people from Hokkaido, like, yeah, we don't have cockroaches here, but there are like in the south. Yeah, so after I realized what I had been doing, my flatmates back then and I started keeping our food trash in the freezer. And one time when I was back home in Sapporo, I saw my mom, you know, do that because that's how we do it in Sapporo. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, like you can't do this. Like you got to put it in the freezer. And she's like, you're not in Taiwan right now. Like relax. Like don't worry. I was like, oh shit, I forgot. Sorry.
Food here is really, that's something I had to get used to too, is that I used to just leave food in my room all the time. And like if it's not closed, it's not actually that bad. But here, you leave it out for an hour, the cockroaches will come.
Yep, for sure.
It's a good habit to have developed.
Yeah.
Useful in Taiwan.
Yep.
What do you like about living in Taiwan, other than the friendliness of the people?
Oh man. I'm from a very snowy place and I love cold temperatures. So every summer when it gets really hot, I'm like, why am I still in Taiwan? But I think what keeps me here is the convenience, at least in Taipei, and how easy it is to get to places throughout Taiwan. It's easy to find activities, whether it's art or music or something outdoors, or social events, dancing. There's always something happening, and you're never bored in Taipei, at least.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think I agree. A lot of people come here and they find there are a lot of activities you can do, and whether you like, you know, crafting or dancing, you know, all the different kind of activities. There's a lot available here, and not too expensive either.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were a teacher before. For how many years did you teach?
Officially with the program that brought me to Taiwan, 2. First year in a public elementary school, and then my second year I was at a public middle school.
So I'm sure you know there's a lot of things about the Taiwanese education system which probably you have recognized, and you see the differences in Taiwanese education systems compared to, you know, Western styles or maybe even Japanese style. But as a teacher, what did you think were the biggest challenges that Taiwanese students had when they were learning English?
In terms of learning English in the classroom, I think it was how much kids were afraid to use it or how much they hated it, actually. So the kids who had like extra bushiban classes with English and had been used to English, they felt really comfortable with me. But those who did not and had a pretty negative experience beforehand really didn't want to communicate with me or like talk at all, even if it was with a Taiwanese English teacher. Yeah, so I think like previous maybe traumatic experiences have like turned them off from wanting to learn in English.
So you think a lot of kids, maybe because of the teaching style here and how it's very much, memorizing words and things.
Yeah. It could be the teaching style, or it could be just that the parents are pushing it on them. Mm-hmm. And because it's not their own motivation that's driving them to learn, they're just like, I'm just doing it because my parents are telling me to do it. And they're not interested in it themselves.
There's no intrinsic motivation to learn.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I hear that a lot as well. What are the biggest differences between Taiwan, Japan, and the US, would you say?
Okay, so let me start with like education style. So because I was educated in a Japanese public school for elementary school, and then I went to a international school for middle school, high school within the US curriculum, and then went to the US for college, and then I'm doing grad school in Taiwan now. So I have experience in 3 countries, being educated in 3 different distinct styles. But I think in Japan, there was a big focus on students cooperating. Like everything was a cooperative endeavor, whether it was like cleaning the classrooms or cleaning other rooms throughout the school building. There was a focus on teamwork, team building, consensus. And at that time, I didn't feel like I wasn't supposed to share my opinions, but I was kind of on the shyer side the older I got. But switching to the international school and then going to college in the US, I was really shocked at how proactive the students were. They were raising their hands all the time. They had something to say. They had their own ideas and opinions. And I was really impressed.
In the US?
Yeah, in the US and at the international school. However, in the US though, it seemed like people just like to talk in general. And I don't want to make judgments here, but I didn't think like a lot of people had much to say, but they still wanted to talk.
Talking for the sake of talking.
Yeah,
basically.
It seemed like that. Yeah. And then I come to Taiwan as a teacher at a public middle school and elementary school. Kids don't want to really raise their hands. Like the really, really, really like proactive ones do. Like you might get like 1 or 2 of them in a class of 28 or 30 students. But it seems like they're always looking for the right answer. And if it's not the right answer, they don't want to say anything. And it's been the case for private students where they're like, oh, teacher, what's the correct answer? And I'm like, well, I'm asking what you think about something. What is your opinion on this? But they just seem so concerned about getting things right. And I'm like, there is no right answer. It's okay. So yeah, education is very different. I think people-wise, in Japan, there seems to be like a great focus and concern about not offending people. And yes, like that exists here in Taiwan and in the US. But in Japan, I feel like there's like an underlying fear. It's driven by fear. In the US, you're polite because that's what you're kind of supposed to do. Like you smile a lot, you hold the door for people. That doesn't happen in Japan. Like I don't even have to make eye contact with people when I'm back home.
So the fear is, what is that fear of in Japan?
I think fear of judgment. A lot of people dress really well and they really care about their appearances, but I think it's because of the fear of being judged.
Do you feel that people are more judgmental in Japan compared to the US?
This is hard to make a blanket statement of, but I think in the US I've been able to feel more at ease with myself. There are more different kinds of people in the US, so I didn't feel like I was obese, whereas in Japan I wasn't directly told that I was obese, but I'm taller than the average Japanese woman, or I have bigger feet, or because I am half white, like I have different features than like quote unquote pure Japanese people. So
they're just less maybe less used to different people and different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. There's less of there's less space to be different. Whereas in the US, there's so many different kinds of people, like maybe not in like the rural areas, but still, like as long as you're American, like that's it, you know? Yeah.
And there are, I guess because also America's so big, there's so many different styles and backgrounds, and people can still look very different.
And still be considered American. Whereas in Japan, as a mixed race person, I'm not really accepted as being Japanese, despite the fact that I'm a native speaker of Japanese language, have a Japanese passport, my father's Japanese, and I have a Japanese sounding looking name. But I think in Taiwan, I see it as like a nice middle ground between Japan and the US. Like, yes, there's consideration for others, but it's not, I don't think it's like driven by fear like it is in Japan. But then you don't get like the smiley holding your door kind of a thing that you get in the US here. So it's nothing is bad, it's just different.
Yeah.
But I do sense that people are a little more relaxed with how they dress or how they present themselves. Yeah, I think one of the biggest shocks, I should have said this earlier, but one of the biggest shocks that I noticed here was how women don't wear a lot of makeup or don't wear high heels or even shave the hair of certain body parts, like the legs or the armpits. And seeing armpit hair on women on the MRT in the summer 7.5 years ago, I was shocked, and I'm going to be honest, I was disgusted. But I've grown, and I now think that like you do you, like whatever makes you comfortable and whatever you want to do with your own body, that's all up to you. And I have like, you know, like no part in judging people for that. Yeah.
I think it's one of the things is when you're when you see and you witness and experience different cultures, you first see things and you're like, whoa, that's so weird, or that's so different. But then you start to understand it and you start to accept it, and it becomes a lot more like, oh, okay, it's just different. Yeah, there's nothing bad about it. It's just different. But yeah, which I think is always really interesting, seeing different cultures and also hearing other people's perspective on a culture that you already know. So for example, I feel like I've known Taiwan, even though I've only lived here 4 years, I know Taiwan pretty well. But I always love hearing other people's experiences or these insights into Taiwan that I might not have thought of before. So that's really cool. So we're approaching the end of our interview. 2 final questions that I'm going to ask all of my interviewees. The first one, since my biggest goal here is still teaching English, what would be your biggest tip for Taiwanese people when they're learning English?
I think for learning English, there's no one right way to learn it. I know at least in Japan, they're like, oh, I want to be like a native speaker level. Like that's what I want to achieve, but I don't think they know how to have fun with learning it in Japan, so people get stuck easily. So I think for English language learners in Taiwan, like find ways to make it fun for yourself, whether it's reading the newspaper or watching shows on Netflix or I don't know, like listening to music. Like make it fun for yourself. Like there's no one right way to learn a language. And also do it in a way that's like sustainable for you. Like it's easy to be like, yes, like these are my language goals, like I want to hit this and this and this by this time, but language takes a lot of time. So be patient with yourself and do it so that you can do it for a long time, so that you're not going to give up after a month or a year.
I love that.
It's a journey.
Yeah, it is. That's true, actually. Yeah, learning a language is a journey. It's not a, you do it for a month and then you ace it. I really like that. That was really good advice. Thank you. The last question, final question. If you could say one thing to Taiwanese people in general, what would you say?
One thing. Is it okay if it's 2?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, they're both like education related, but I think being a teacher, I've been heartbroken seeing my kids just like having to work so hard all the time. Like they go to school and then they get like bused to like a cram school afterwards. I'm like, when do these kids get to be kids? Like I'm not sure if they have enough time to just, socialize and like play around, like run around and be a kid. So I guess my first wish/hope is for kids like to have the space and the time to just be kids and not have to work on school and assignments all the time. And I think that relates to my second thing that I'd like to say is that like leave yourself and like other people space for making mistakes. Being a teacher, I felt like my students weren't allowed that.
They were scared of making mistakes.
Yeah, they're always scared of making mistakes. So like their questions were, well, teacher, what's the right answer? But when you take that fear of making mistakes out of the equation, then they're more at ease of exploring, I think. And maybe even like developing their own ideas and perspectives and just like experimenting more. Yeah, so when you have that fear of failure, I think it keeps you from trying a lot of things or like doing some things differently. So yeah, give yourself and people spaces to do that, and then I think that just like connects to growth in so many other ways.
So I would say in summary, basically is enjoy life, have fun.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yes.
Enjoy life and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Because that's literally the best way to learn something.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, Lydia, for having me.
It was really fun. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. 听完 Aria 的访谈，有没有觉得听外国人的想法对于台湾跟文化差异真的是一件很有趣的事情？那让我现在来翻译一下他刚刚所说的一些话。第一个是我问他有没有被台湾的什么生活习惯吓到，他说他竟然是被卫生纸吓到。意思就是呢，他说去上厕所的时候，卫生纸都是丢垃圾桶，而不是冲马桶。这件事情让他非常的意外，而且很不习惯。他说在日本他们一定会直接把它冲掉。下一个我问他说他有没有不习惯台湾的什么特质，他就说回想他那时候在美国的时候，有一位同学刚好是台湾人，他就说去台湾很棒，因为台湾人非常善良。结果他来了之后，他就发现哇，台湾人真的是很友善，而且路上还会帮陌生人啊。他说这一开始他很不习惯，但是他觉得这是一件好事，不是坏事，只是他真的不习惯。接下来我就问他，大家有没有误会日本的文化或习惯？他告诉我说，寿司不是每天吃的东西，它其实是一个很特别节日才会吃的。所以其实他在便利商店看到卖寿司，他会觉得这是一件很怪的事情，因为在日本这是一个特别的餐。接下来我就问他，来台湾之后有没有学到哪一些台湾人的习惯？他说第一个是他随时一定会带伞，因为他说宜兰很常下雨，所以他就开始习惯随身一定要带着一把伞，还有带着水壶，因为他发现台湾到处都有饮水机，很方便，所以一定要带水壶。最后他觉得最大的一个习惯是他现在开始把厨余垃圾会放在冷冻库。他说他刚来的时候直接把厨余留在厨房，结果引来一堆蟑螂，他吓到，所以他现在就很习惯会把他的厨余垃圾放在冷冻库里面。接下来我就问他喜欢台湾的什么，他说他觉得台湾很方便，无论是生活啊、交通或是找活动，在台北永远都不会觉得无聊。后来我就问他关于他教学的经验，我问他说他觉得台湾的学生学英文的时候最大的障碍是什么？他说他发现很多学生不敢开口，或是没有动力，有时候是因为被家长逼，有时候是因为学习经验不好，但总是让他觉得很可惜。之后我就问他台湾跟美国跟日本最大的不同是哪里？他说他觉得教育观很不一样，日本非常注重团体活动，美国教育就很鼓励学生发言跟提供自己的想法，那台湾人比较不敢举手发言，永远在找对的答案，但有时候就是没有对错，他们就会觉得很焦虑。人跟人之间的互动他觉得也有不同，日本人很怕得罪人，美国人的想法比较开放，那台湾人属于中间的平衡。最后问他2个问题，第一个是他想要给学英文的台湾人最大的建议是什么？ 他说要用自己喜欢的方式学习，这样才会有动力持续。他说学语言就像是一个旅程，它需要时间慢慢经营，所以你一定要对自己有耐心，不要急着要达成母语的程度，持续的慢慢的维持才会进步。最后一个问题就是他有没有想要对台湾人说的一些话。他说他其实有2件事情想说。第一个是他希望可以让小孩们有更多的时间和空间当单纯快乐的小孩。他觉得台湾的小朋友很辛苦，要补习，要上课，要写功课。他希望可以看到更多小孩们过得更快乐，更单纯。第二个是他想要告诉台湾人的是说，不要害怕做错事情，给自己和身边的人犯错的机会，你会发现可以学到更多，也可以成长更多。犯错不是坏事，反而可以让你变得更好。听完翻译的你，现在可以回去再听一次 Aria 说的话，看你有没有觉得好像比较听得懂。如果没有的话，没有关系，就像 Aria 说的，要给自己点时间慢慢练习，这样才会有机会变得更好。如果你喜欢我们今天的节目，记得可以帮我留言或是分享，也可以在 IG 私讯我，告诉我你的想法。之后还会有很多的跟其他外国人的访谈，如果有什么特别想了解的，特别想问的，也欢迎随时私讯我。I had such a great time talking to Aria today. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did, and also learned something interesting. If you enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can also tag me on Instagram, Teacher Lydia Languages, to let me know what you thought and to stay up to date with the newest interviews. 那我们下次见咯. See you next time!